All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Let's go ahead and get started. My name is Matt Dumlau, and I call this meeting of the Ocean Protection Council to order. Thank you, everyone, for attending, and let's begin with the roll call. Good. Holly, can you hear me? Are we good? Okay.
Sorry, we're having a bit of a mic issue. Sorry about that. Roll call for those in person. We have acting secretary or acting chair, Matt Dumlau.
Here.
All right. We have Katie Landau. Here. And Alexis Jackson. Here. And then virtually we have Megan Rocha. Megan, can you unmute yourself?
Yes, I'm here.
And I also have Catherine Moore.
Here.
Thank you.
Well, as you guys can tell, we have a slightly different lineup than normally. Secretaries Crowfoot and Garcia and the Lieutenant Governor are unfortunately unable to attend today. So we have a few people filling in, including myself. I will be acting as chair for today. I'm the Lieutenant Governor's Chief of Staff and Environmental Policy Advisor. And so joining us for Secretary Garcia is Katie Landau. And is Anna going to be joining? Okay, all right. And then we also will have Senator Ben Allen joining us, or maybe Catherine is here in his place. And Assemblywoman Dawn Addis will be joining in a little bit as well. And then like we saw in the roll call, we have Councilmember Rocha joining virtually. All right, so I will review the process for public comment and then invite council members to provide any updates. We will take public comment after items 4 through 9 and general public comment on non-agenda issues on item 10. I will invite public comment after each of those items. If you wish to make a comment and are attending in person, please line up at the podium. We will take in-person public comments first. After all in-person attendees have spoken, we will take public comment from those joining us virtually. If you are joining us through Zoom, please raise your virtual hand and we will unmute you. Announce your name and you will be able to provide your comment to the council. If you have called into the meeting via telephone, press #2 to raise your hand. Depending on how you have accessed the meeting, you may also need to unmute yourself. Public comment is limited to 2 minutes each. There will be a timer on the screen to track your allotted time. Anyone interested in providing comment will need to raise his or her hand by the end of the agenda presentation. Hands raised after that time will not be placed in the queue for comment. All right, would any of our council members like to share anything? And welcome Assemblywoman Addis. Anyone joining virtually? Any of our council members joining virtually? I'd like to make any comments. All right. Well, we can just jump right into the rest of the agenda. Awesome. Now I'd like to move on to item 2, our updates from the executive director. So I will turn the floor over to Ms. Eckerle.
Thank you, Chair and members of the council. I'm going to start with a quick budget update. I am very happy to report that the final FY 23-24 budget restored significant funding for coastal resilience that was previously proposed to be cut. The final budget includes restoration of close to $80 million to OPC for ecosystem protection and sea level rise adaptation efforts. We also received $9.5 million to develop an intertidal biodiversity DNA barcode library, and significant funding was restored to the Coastal Conservancy for their coastal resilience work. A few updates on our equity work. To support equity plan implementation over the next 3 years, OPC staff will establish an environmental justice advisory board of public members representing tribal and environmental justice communities along the California coast. Our environmental justice advisory board We'll work closely with our staff to provide knowledge and expertise on key equity plan priorities, including but not limited to community engagement opportunities, strategies to improve equitable access to OPC's funding, and co-development of statewide equity indicators to inform OPC's annual Coast and Ocean report. This effort will be advanced in partnership with Better World Group, with recruitment of our Environmental Justice Advisory Board members anticipated in the next few months. Excuse me. Next, an update on our small grants programs. Last year, the council approved the creation of an environmental justice small grants program and a tribal small grants program, each totaling $1 million for grant funding. At the time that this funding was approved, OPC staff were still working to identify appropriate grantees to administer these programs. I'm pleased to share that we are partnering with Justice Outside to administer our environmental justice small grants program for projects that provide benefits to environmental justice communities and advance our coastal and ocean priorities in the strategic plan. Justice Outside will work closely with OPC staff and our Environmental Justice Advisory Board to design and implement this program. For our tribal small grants program, we have added our $1 million for tribal ocean and coastal priorities into the Natural Resource Agency's $100 million Tribal Nature-Based Solutions Grant Program. I will say the Deputy Secretary is very proud to say that we have $101 million for that program now. This really allows us to leverage CNRA's broader efforts to reduce our administrative burden, to maximize efficiency, respect tribal capacity, and increase access to funds for tribally led projects. The grant guidelines for the Tribal Nature-Based Solutions Program are available on CNRA's website, and we hope to bring our recommended small grants projects to the council for approval in early 2024. Now for a few federal updates. First, on the Tijuana River. Last week, in response to the ongoing environmental and public health crisis caused by the discharge of untreated wastewater into the Tijuana River, Governor Newsom sent a letter to the Biden administration urging the federal government to provide critical funding to address the needed repairs and upgrades to the South Bay International Treatment Plant. Continued sewage discharge is polluting public beaches in Southern California, resulting in months of beach closures with significant impacts to underserved and environmental justice communities, among others. The governor's letter was preceded by a letter from Secretaries Crowfoot and Garcia to members of the California congressional delegation, which also requested funding to address this ongoing and unacceptable situation. The governor's office is actively evaluating next steps to pursue federal funding to address this issue. Next, an update on the development of a federal ocean justice strategy. So last month, Secretary Crowfoot submitted a letter to the White House Council on Environmental Quality in response to a request for information to guide the development of a federal ocean justice strategy. The letter was informed by input from CNRA's Office of Tribal Affairs, OPC, the Coastal Commission, State Lands Commission, and the Department of Fish and Wildlife, and outlined California's priorities, values, and actions to improve equity and impacts to California Native American tribes and communities burdened by environmental injustice. The letter highlighted OPC's tribal engagement strategy and our equity plan, among other key actions by CNRA and the administration. This letter is posted on OPC's website. My final federal update is about funding for our adaptation and resilience work. NOAA recently announced its Climate Resilience Regional Challenge, which will provide $575 million in Inflation Reduction Act funds nationally to support projects that build climate resilience for coastal communities. Funding will support regional planning and adaptation projects. CNRA leadership has been facilitating collaboration among state and external partners to maximize federal funding awarded for coastal resilience efforts in California. Letters of intent are due on August 21st. Now I'd like to share just a few program updates. First, on our sea level rise guidance. The Ocean Protection Council committed to updating our sea level rise guidance every 5 years to ensure that it is based on the best available science. Last June, the council approved funding to Ocean Science Trust to convene a science task force to facilitate this update. You will hear more about this during Dr. Whiteman's report, but 3 quick notes from me. 1, we anticipate releasing the guidance for 30-day public comment in mid-September. 2, we are initiating tribal outreach and early consultation this Thursday and will continue these efforts for several months. And 3, we intend to bring the final guidance for the council's approval at its December meeting. I want to extend my sincere appreciation and gratitude for Dr. Whiteman and her team at Ocean Science Trust, including Monica LaFleur and Dom Kone, for their leadership and partnership throughout this effort. An additional huge thanks to Dr. Ben Hamilton and the other members of the Science Task Force for contributing their time and expertise. A quick note on our work on kelp. On July 10th, after council approval in January, the Ocean Protection Council, Department of Fish and Wildlife, and California Sea Grant announced the release of $5 million in new funding to accelerate and scale up kelp restoration and research in California, building on OPC's previous investments. Letters of intent are due to Sea Grant at 5 p.m. today, and we plan to bring the final recommended projects to the council for approval at your December meeting. And speaking of Sea Grant, I want to acknowledge the 50th anniversary of California Sea Grant program and welcome the council and everyone here in the audience today to join us for a reception celebrating this milestone anniversary at the California Museum starting at 5:30. Our ongoing partnership with the state's 2 Sea Grant programs, California Sea Grant and USC Sea Grant, is critical to directing best available science to our policy and management needs. And California Sea Grant Fellowship continues to embed bright and dedicated graduate students into state, federal, and other agencies, many of whom are here with us today. Finally, a few personnel updates, and it was very difficult for me to wait until the end to do this. I am thrilled to share that Caitlin Kalua is OPC's new deputy director. Caitlin has been, Caitlin has been working as OPC's water quality program manager and legislative lead for the last several years. She has a law degree from UC Davis School of Law, and in addition to her strong water quality background, has experience with coastal adaptation planning, federal ocean policy, and environmental advocacy. She is smart as a whip, professional and thoughtful, and has already hit the ground running. She is also beloved by the entire OPC team, and we are all delighted to have her in this role. The only downside to this fantastic hire is that we now need to backfill for Caitlin's position. To that end, we have just posted a job announcement for our water quality program manager on our website yesterday, and applications are due on September 1st. I'm also happy to welcome Ann Deep and Abby Mohan to OPC as OPC's 2 new 30 by 30 program managers. Before starting at OPC, Ann was a CCST Science Policy Fellow at CNRA, working on 30 by 30 and the Tribal Nature-Based Solutions Grant Program. Ann has a Ph.D. from UC Merced, where they studied immune responses to valley fever. Ann will be leading our 30 by 30 strategic communications, community and tribal engagement, and managing our tribal small grants program. Abby comes to us from a climate change research firm where she worked at the intersection of coastal policy and science. Abby has a master's degree in marine science from San Francisco State University and is a 100-ton licensed boat captain. Abby will lead our spatial management areas inventory, coordination with national marine sanctuaries, and help fill other scientific and research gaps to advance our 30 by 30 work. You will hear more from both of them during item 8, but maybe you guys can give a little wave. Yeah. And now I have just a few transitions to report. In late June, Lindsay Benito, our MPA program manager, left OPC to join the Department of Fish and Wildlife as a senior environmental scientist. While we were sad to see her go, we are thrilled she has not gone far. The job announcement for our MPA program manager position is posted on our website, and applications are due this Friday. This week, we also learned that Noah Benaderet, OPC Sustainable Fisheries and Aquaculture Program Manager, will be leaving OPC to take a senior environmental scientist position with the Office of Spill Prevention and Response. Noah's last day will be with us on September 1st, and we wish him the best in this new role and hope to have a job announcement to fill this position soon. Finally, I want to thank our summer interns, Bella Carreon, Azura Haley, Audrey Jung, Nathan Lee, Alyssa Ng, and Veronica Whaley for being a part of our team this summer. You will hear from them during item 4, and I'm guessing that you will all be as impressed with them as I am. I hope their time at OPC has provided experience and insights that will help shape their careers. We can't wait to see what's in store for all of them. That concludes my report. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions or comments from members of the council? Yes, Alexis, please.
2 comments and 1 question. First, welcome to the new staff and also congratulations to Caitlin. I think Assemblywoman Luz Rivas said women are making it happen, and it's always great to see more women championing our oceans. The second comment is about the equity implementation plan. I think, holding ourselves accountable is the hard part of the work. And I think that this model could be a really important one that other organizations and agencies could follow. So really love the advisory board. And then my question is about the technical assistance program. So I saw that you guys are already reviewing applications, and just curious, are you seeing a decent number of applications, or are you feeling that there's more outreach needed? Just curious.
Thank you, Councilmember Jackson. And you're referring to the technical assistance program for SB1 grant program?
Yes.
Yes, so we are reviewing applications. We did not get a huge candidate pool, and we're in the process of reviewing those applications, and we will be back in touch soon with an update to the council.
Thank you, and welcome, Senator Allen. Any other comments from members of the council? All right, well, I would just also like to congratulate all the folks who got promotions or moved on to exciting things or have joined the team. I have no doubt we'll be able to backfill with an excellent individual for Caitlin's old position. And I just had a couple comments. One, thank you to the governor and the legislature for working hard to find a way to fund this incredibly important ocean work. I know it was a difficult budget year, and the fact that we were able to still get a significant amount of resources in the budget for ocean work is tremendous. Also, thank you to the governor and administration for the Tijuana River letters. This is just an unacceptable situation along our border, and having the governor continue to push on this issue and push our federal partners to do more is incredibly important. And I know, having visited that area, just how toxic and unacceptable that area is, but also how beautiful that those beaches are, and how tragic it is that for hundreds of days, some of those beaches have been closed. And lastly, just want to acknowledge Sea Grant, just incredibly important to important contributions to the state. So hope to see more folks today for the reception. All right, unless there's any other comments, I think we can move on to item number 3, which is our update from the science advisor. So Dr. Liz Whiteman, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Council members, 3 updates for you today, all actually with a similar theme, one of rapidly evolving scientific understanding, and some new science frameworks and communications tools that it's our charge to connect effectively with policy development and do what we can to enable urgent but durable action. So first, on the sea level rise guidance, thank you, Jenn, for your partnership and trust in the role that science can play in building policy solutions and accelerating our progress. Building on Jenn's comments, we're prepping to send the guidance to the State Sea Level Rise Collaborative for review and feedback. And we deeply appreciate the time and effort that state agency partners and local and regional practitioners have already invested in making this be as useful and impactful as possible. We're going to continue to ask for more engagement to help make this really be what it can be, I think. As a quick aside, this process is particularly rewarding for me. I recall how last year when we launched this update effort, we were talking here at a council meeting about how significant the existing sea level rise guidance has been, but also how sea level rise remains such a challenging policy issue, in part because there were just so many choices for local and regional decision makers. Saying, which projection do I pick? How much risk am I willing to assume? Which emissions pathway are we going to be on in the future, by the way? So today, as we apply the latest science, which is coming from both the international science community and a federal task force convened last year, honestly, the science community is really stepping up their game in not just passing that uncertainty into the policy realm, but putting forward a framework with scenarios for California's future that provides much more decision guidance. I also want to quickly acknowledge Dr. Ben Hamilton from NASA's JPL lab, one of the co-chairs of our task force. He has been an incredible partner. He has clearly found the way to multiply hours in the day as he's working with, I think, 5 different groups from across 5 different US states at the moment, also going through processes to develop sea level rise policy. And I mention that not just to acknowledge Ben's amazing partnership, but also because I think it's valuable for us to know the ways in which we're aligned with other states tackling this issue in applying this science and the sea level rise scenarios, but also that we're on the leading edge on some aspects of our work, an important role that California often plays, said with my best British accent. So switching topics to restoration and mitigation, as OPC advances policy on this topic, we're of course bringing collaboration with the science community to the table. Although there's clearly, obviously, we all know there's a well-established landscape of restoration activities, well-grounded in science best practices developed over the last 20 to 30 or plus years in California and beyond. It's rapidly becoming a tad upended by climate change and by new stressors and proposed new ocean uses. So just as with sea level rise, we're partnering with OPC to understand how science can support and lift very forward-looking policy on this topic. And finally, third update, we've been working with your science advisory team and in coordination with the West Coast Ocean Alliance to identify and develop a list of trackable and scorable indicators to form a science foundation for building out the Ocean and Coasts report card for OPC. These indicators span ecosystem features like habitat quality, to stressors like pollution, to human considerations such as coastal access. Now, anyone who has ever worked on report card processes, particularly about the natural world, knows how hard it is to select indicators that are actually telling you what you think they are telling you, particularly in a changing climate. And to identify a limited and feasible set for tracking into the future. So thank you for the SAT members for engaging with us up until this point. Again, we're not done. There's more work to do, and we'll keep asking for their collaboration and look forward to sharing more details on that work at the next council meeting at the end of the year, including a roadmap for how to score and incorporate these indicators into a comprehensive ocean health report card. So I'll pause there. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that update. Are there any questions or comments from the council?
Yeah, I would like a question if I could.
Yes, please go for it.
Yeah, so it's really exciting to hear that the report card is moving forward. I know the West Coast Ocean Alliance has been talking about that for quite some time. So am I understanding correctly that you guys are coordinating through that effort and the indicators will be consistent across Washington, Oregon, and California?
Chair, if I might. Thank you for that question. And Liz, you can fill in if I miss anything. Yes, we are working in very close partnership with the West Coast Ocean Alliance. We had years ago, before COVID, had an in-person meeting of the Alliance to start to identify the suite of potential indicators. And over the last couple of years, we have been refining those specifically for California, while the Alliance is working on a broader set of regional indicators. So I would say, just building on what Liz says, we're on the leading edge in California. We're a little bit ahead of our partner states to the north, but we are absolutely collaborating. Anything you would add, Liz?
Just a brief acknowledgement that the work of the Science Advisory Team to bring the academic science perspective to the table is just one input into the broader effort that I know you're engaging in to develop a comprehensive ocean and health report card that reflects broad perspectives and ways of knowing.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilmember Rocha, for the question. Any other questions or comments? All right. Moving on, our next item on the agenda is number 4. I think one of the best things that the OPC does is bring these young minds into state government for a few months, and then love to hear more about it. So Caitlin, please come on up and give the presentation when you're ready.
So again, thank you, Chair Dimlow. And that was a wonderful mic check. Again, this past summer, OPC hosted a cohort of 6 interns to help advance OPC's strategic plan and priorities with the overarching goal, providing meaningful professional experience in state government. This is the 3rd year of OPC's 10-week paid internship program, and we are thrilled and delighted to host 5 interns as part of this summer's internship program. This is also OPC's 6th year partnering with the Haas Center for Public Service undergraduate fellowship program at Stanford University, through which we were thrilled for Audrey, Jung to join OPC this summer. And with that, it is great pleasure that I introduce and invite the 2023 summer internship participants, Isabella, Veronica, Audrey, and Nathan to the podium to present. Azura, Haley, and Alyssa are joining us today remotely. Thank you. Next slide, please. And with that, Isabella, the floor is yours.
Hi, my name is Isabella Carreon. I'm a 3rd year at Pomona College, and I'm studying environmental economics right now. And I've had the amazing opportunity to have Ella as my mentor this summer and learn all about sea level rise policy and planning, and work alongside Megan and Ben on the sea level rise team. The 2 main projects that I worked on over the summer were the SB1 grant program. Sorry, thank you. The SB1 grant program and the Coast and Oceans Indicators project. For the SB1 grant program, I helped evaluate technical assistance proposals aimed to help facilitate sea level rise planning in underserved communities. I also researched and analyzed vulnerability assessments, adaptation plans, and LCPs along the California coast to develop sea level rise adaptation criteria, which will act as guidelines for future sea level rise planning, future sea level rise adaptation planning. For the indicators project, I worked with Ella compiling data for the sea level rise indicator and the sea level rise planning indicator, finding data about the rates of sea level rise and progress of sea level rise planning across California jurisdictions. Lastly, I worked with fellow intern Veronica Whaley to create a high tide flood callout box, which highlights the environmental and economic damages of this past year's atmospheric river storms. I've gained valuable insights on sea level rise adaptation initiatives across the state and learned how important it is to bridge the gap between science and policy. I am extremely grateful to have worked with such a welcoming and amazing team who have showed me what it's like to make a meaningful impact in state government and to help protect California from the impacts of climate change. Thank you, and I'll pass it on to Audrey.
Hello, my name is Audrey Jung, and I'm a 3rd year student at Stanford University, majoring in environmental systems engineering on the coastal systems track. I had the pleasure of working with Caitlin Klua this summer, who was the previous water quality program manager and now current deputy director at OPC. And I focused on several projects this summer with several of the strategic goals of OPC, including climate, equity, and biodiversity. And so for ocean acidification, I worked on writing a call-out box for ocean acidification thresholds for the annual indicator report. And I'm currently working on a white paper about water quality requirements in different states, focusing on nutrient requirements. I also collaborated with fellow intern Alyssa Ng and her mentor Maria Rodriguez on the beach water quality indicator for the annual report, where we looked at and evaluated the impact of statewide beach advisories and closures. I also had the opportunity to sit in on the microplastics request for proposal technical panels, where I was able to listen in on the decision-making processes of the RFPs and kind of get an inside look on that. And lastly, I worked on compiling equity indicators and metrics used by other California state agencies to support the future Environmental Justice Advisory Board. This is my first internship at a government agency, and I was really happy to be able to deep dive into ocean topics from a policy and equity side of view, while I usually look at the science side. So it really cemented my interest and my career path in ocean science and just interdisciplinary ocean issues. I'm really grateful to Caitlin for being such an amazing mentor and for really shaping the internship to my interests and giving me so many resources and opportunities. I'm really grateful to be able to work with OPC and just meet everybody on the amazing, supportive, and really welcoming team. And with that, I'll pass it on to Veronica. Thank you.
Good afternoon, council members. It's a pleasure to be here in front of you all today. My name is Veronica Whaley, and I have the honor of representing the Los Rios Community College system as a biology major. To start, I would like to express gratitude to my mentor, Srija Gopal, our Coastal Habitats Program Manager, for providing me with the support and the counsel that I needed as I explored coast and ocean policy work for the first time. Over the 10 weeks that I spent with OPC, my work focused on creating an equity and outreach guiding report for the development of the Wetland Action Plan. This piece is pursuant to the Ocean Protection Council's current strategic plan goal 1.1, and more specifically target 1.1.7, involving the protection and restoration of coastal wetland habitats. My work involved evaluating equity documents and strategic plans across state agencies, grantees, and other practitioners to be assembled in a list of core environmental justice considerations for OPC's Wetland Action Plan. Under Srija's guidance, I was also able to attend a meeting with members of the State Coastal Conservancy and discuss areas of need in conservation, monitoring, and tribal and community engagement that may be addressed through our development of this document. In addition to this project, I am grateful to have worked with fellow intern Isabella Carreon in her writing for the call-out box addressing flood risk areas in the wake of this year's storm events, which will be included for consideration in the 2023 State of the Coast and Ocean Report. To this end, I reference and summarize data on demographics and projected losses for our cities that are the most at risk and most populated with the risk of sea level rise. As a whole, my participation in this internship has furthered my understanding of legal language, grant solicitations, and science-related policy. And I'm excited to take these skills and experiences as I transfer to the University of Washington this fall for a major in environmental science and resource management, and as inspired by the many leaders here at OPC, a minor in marine biology. With that, I thank you, and I would like to pass this on to fellow intern Azura.
Hi, everyone. My name's Azura, and I'm a rising senior at UCLA, majoring in political science and double minoring in LGBTQ studies and community engagement and social change. I've loved working with the Ocean Protection Council, especially with my mentor, Stacey Hayden, our communications manager, and I'm so thankful for this opportunity. I worked on many communications projects this summer to spread the word about OPC and the projects we do with our partners and grantees. Throughout the summer, I created a month-long social media campaign about our 2020 to 2025 strategic plan that explores our goals and some of our most significant actions toward them to show the public why we have chosen these goals and how we will accomplish them. I also worked with Stacy to create new website directories for our partners, grantees, and the projects that we have funded. The directories and the social media campaign will be released in the fall. Additionally, I contributed to the OPC writing style guide and prioritized documents for 508 accessibility. As for the annual Ocean Indicators report, I have been helping Caitlin Kalua, our deputy director, with the wastewater recycling indicator. I updated the descriptive piece from last year's report, and we brainstormed with water boards on how to expand on last year's work. This summer, I learned so much about the projects OPC has funded throughout the years, and I've really liked finding ways to effectively communicate this work to the public. It's been inspiring to see the commitment that California has to protecting the ocean, and I've thoroughly enjoyed connecting with so many passionate people and being a part of this great work. And now I'll pass it on to Alyssa to talk about her internship. Next slide, please.
Hi, everyone. My name is Alyssa Ng, and I'm going into my final year at the University of Southern California, where I'm majoring in environmental studies. I was lucky to be mentored by Maria Rodriguez, OPC's Climate and Environmental Justice Program Manager this summer, as I learned about the work OPC does to achieve environmental justice. During my time here, I developed preparatory materials for OPC's upcoming Environmental Justice Advisory Board to help guide their work developing equity indicators. I also worked closely with my fellow intern Audrey and her mentor Caitlin Kalua to develop the beach water quality indicator for this year's annual report. Additionally, I helped update OPC signage and communications materials guidelines for grantees to better address cultural and linguistic accessibility. Contributing to OPC's environmental justice and equity work during my internship has been so personally and professionally rewarding. It's given me invaluable insight and experience working in a policy at a state agency that I know will help me shape my future career. Before I finish, I just want to thank my mentor, Maria, and everyone else at OPC who has made my time here so wonderful and who have welcomed me into the critical work they do every day. With that, I'm passing it off to Nathan.
Good afternoon. My name is Nathan, and I'm a fourth year at UC Davis, majoring in environmental policy, analysis, and planning. Over the summer, I've been lucky to have been mentored by Michael Eckerle, who is our senior biodiversity program manager and tribal liaison. Over the past 10 weeks, I've been working with Mike on the tribal engagement strategies that OPC adopted in January of 2023. To that end, I've been interviewing academics and tribal representatives to create a best practices document for academics to follow when collaborating with tribes. I've also compiled a white paper of co-management strategies on the West Coast and abroad to facilitate future OPC support of tribal co-management, specifically of marine protected areas. Lastly, I've helped visualize kelp canopy coverage trends through maps and graphs for the annual Coast and Ocean Indicator Report in collaboration with the West Coast Ocean Alliance. I am grateful for the opportunity to begin learning how to center equity in marine policy in the state government and how to bridge science and policy to protect biodiversity from climate change. Next slide, please. On behalf of all the interns, thank you for the opportunity to present in front of you today and for the experiences we gained over the summer. We're happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you very much, all of you, for those wonderful presentations. Are there any members of the public who would like to comment or ask questions?
We don't have any virtual comments.
Great. All right. So how about any members of the council? Any questions or comments? Yes, please.
Well, this is a wonderful introduction to being a member of OPC. So I want to say congratulations to the new folks in their new positions, but also to the interns. I'm a classroom teacher formerly and a mom, but I also represent California's oceans from Santa Cruz to Santa Barbara. So 20% of California's coastline, and it's incredibly inspiring to hear the work that you've done, that you're learning from, but also what you're giving back to the state of California through the OPC, and just want to say a very heartfelt thank you for that.
Any other comments or questions? Yeah, I would just like to echo Assemblymember Addis on those points. You know, I think the mark of a good internship is getting more out of it than you give to the program that you work for. So I hope all of you got a tremendous amount out of your experience. I was also really heartened to see just the breadth of projects that you guys worked on. All of it was incredibly important, and you know, I know how helpful internships can be in shaping what you want to do later in life. And so I hope, you know, in the years to come, when you're all working for OPC, you can look back fondly at this internship. So thank you very much, all of you. All right, the next item on our agenda is item number 5. And I would like to invite Megan Williams to come up and provide the presentation.
See if that works. Okay. Good afternoon, council members. My name is Megan Williams, and I am OPC's Coastal Adaptation Program Manager, here to talk to you today about our new Senate Bill 1 grant program for supporting sea level rise adaptation planning. Next slide, please. So for some background, in 2021, Governor Newsom signed Senate Bill 1 into law. SB 1 directs the state to provide funding to local and regional governments to develop sea level rise adaptation plans and implementation projects. In 2022 and 2023, OPC received a total of $92 million to support the implementation of Senate Bill 1, with an additional $10 million anticipated in the 2024 to 2025 budget. We started developing this program last fall, and throughout the entire development of the SB 1 grant program, OPC staff have worked closely with California Coastal Commission and the San Francisco Bay Conservation and Development Commission staff to ensure that the SB 1 grant program is complementary to and supportive of local coastal program efforts in Bay Adapt's San Francisco Bay Shoreline Adaptation Plan development. Ultimately, the goal of OPC's SB 1 Sea Level Rise Adaptation Planning Grant Program, or SB 1 grant program, is to provide funding for coastal communities to develop consistent sea level rise adaptation plans and projects to build resilience along the coast of California and San Francisco Bay. Next slide, please. The SB 1 grant program is planned to launch this fall. In accordance to SB 1, the eligible applicants or grantees of this funding are local, regional, and tribal governments or applicants on behalf of these entities. We will offer 2 different tracks of funding, one for pre-planning and planning phases, which is track 1, and then one for the project phase, which is track 2. For all SB 1 grant projects, be them the pre-planning, planning, or project, they must follow the sea level rise adaptation criteria. Next slide, please. The sea level rise adaptation criteria, which was included as Exhibit A in my staff recommendation, was developed by OPC staff alongside the California Sea Level Rise State and Regional Support Collaborative. The criteria is a standardized set of minimum requirements for sea level rise adaptation projects in the pre-planning, planning, and implementation phases. Ultimately, the sea level rise criteria aims to establish best practices through all phases of sea level rise adaptation planning. By doing so, it ensures that sea level rise planning and implementation projects along the coast incorporate consistent components. This uniformity not only ensures neighboring communities are planning for sea level rise at the same level and caliber, but also enables California to make smart, well-informed investments when preparing for sea level rise. Eligible projects within track 1, pre-planning and planning, include community visioning, vulnerability assessments, data collection, sea level rise adaptation plans, San Francisco Bay shoreline adaptation plans, and sector-specific sea level rise adaptation plans. Projects within track 2 include nature-based and green-gray hybrid adaptation projects, feasibility studies, and/or design. Next slide, please. Following the release of the SB 1 grant program solicitation in fall 2023, track 1 proposals will be accepted through a rolling quarterly non-competitive process, provided they satisfy the sea level rise criteria and the final solicitation template requirements. Starting in mid to late 2024, track 2 proposals will be accepted through a competitive process. This strategic prioritization of planning in the first phase of the SB 1 grant program reflects the state's need to support planning efforts and fills a critical need given the limited funding available from other resources to conduct the planning phase. However, OPC staff do recognize the importance of funding timely implementation projects. Therefore, during that period between the release of the solicitation and the acceptance of those track 2 proposals, we will establish a mechanism to identify and prioritize shovel-ready implementation projects for consideration. To ensure adequate funding for tribal adaptation plans and projects, a % of total available funds will be set aside specifically to support grants for tribal governments. We are also committed to investing a certain amount of funds to projects that benefit environmental justice communities. However, those exact percentages and amounts will be provided when we release the SB1 grant program solicitation. Next slide, please. So with that, the recommendation is to disperse up to $95.9 million to local, regional, and tribal governments who submit a successful application to the SB1 grant program. This action would meet objective 1.1 within our strategic plan. And with that, next slide. Next slide, please. I or my colleague, Alec McDougall, who is co-leading the SB1 grant program with me, will be happy to answer any questions. And thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Do we have, let's see, any members of the public who would like to speak on this item?
We have no virtual hands up for this item.
All right. Do you have one in the room?
Hi, Laura Walsh with the Surfrider Foundation. I just wanted to quickly support very emphatically this allocation on behalf of our 100 chapters and clubs in California dedicated to protecting our beaches. State funding is so critical for the LCP process and through the SB1 planning. We're so happy to finally see this allocation. And I just wanted to quickly say, according to the Legislative Analyst Office, every dollar we spend today is $3 more in the future when it comes to climate resilience. And I really want to emphasize the need for the track 2 project types that were mentioned, the implementation projects. Surfriders worked a long time in Santa Cruz on sea level rise planning. And just this year in the January storms, we saw a single set of storms steamroll years of planning on West Cliff Drive. So we really hope that some of this money can really be geared towards implementation. And then finally, I just wanted to talk about the sea level rise adaptation criteria really quickly, because Surfrider really wants to continue seeing our state agencies support realistic projects that protect public tidelands and public resources. That does include managed retreat. And we want to be realistic about some of the trade-offs that come with gray infrastructure and be very cautious about what we're trading when we allow some of these projects, even those that are hybrid projects. So thank you very much for considering.
Thank you for those comments.
Hello, I'm Carla Heidelberg, and I'm the new director of Sea Grant program based in Los Angeles. USC Sea Grant fully supports the SB1 grant program solicitation to support sea level rise adaptation planning. We've submitted written comments on our support of this initiative. Since 2011, USC Sea Grant has managed the regional Adapt LA program, which is a community practice linking the best available science with local governments to advance coastal adaptation planning. We've worked directly with community-based organizations from Long Beach to Goleta, increasing collaboration among coalition partners. As part of this work, USC Sea Grant recently conducted a statewide survey of coastal practitioners, the fourth in a series since 2005. Preliminary results suggest that coastal and shoreline hazards are the most challenging issues faced by coastal practitioners, a trend that has continued since the 2016 results. Nearly 2/3 of respondents cited lack of funding as a barrier to implementing coastal adaptation. So the SB1 funding opportunity directly addresses this barrier and can help advance adaptation planning in the state. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carla. Any other public comments? All right, seeing none, are there any comments from members of the council?
Yeah, so I think it's great to see that there's a large amount of funding that's available to address this important issue. And certainly the OPC funded report speaks to the need for that, given the low number of plans that are in place. I think I just wanted to make a comment about the importance of applicants having full transparency into some of the prioritization criteria, particularly given there are limited funds. Like if there are bars that would stop people from receiving funding, during phase 1 and phase 2, it will help them organize like what funding do we have available? Would we rather allocate that to one and then seek funding for a second phase? Factors like that.
Yeah, I think that's a great consideration. I think we're still trying to iron out some of the very specifics of exactly how we're going to be doling out and everything, and that's going to come with the solicitation, but something really critical to keep in mind.
Thank you. And we have a question from Councilmember Rocha.
You're
I think you're
muted.
on mute.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I was just saying some of my questions may have to do more with some of the details that still need to be worked out. But I did notice track 1 was non-competitive. And so I just was wondering if there has been sort of a cap that's already been discussed as to what an eligible applicant could receive for that funding, since it is non-competitive.
Yes, another good question, and certainly something that we are still trying to think about. We obviously want to make sure that, the overall goal is for the entire coast to be planning and preparing. And so we don't want it to be where, one entity just like beats out everyone and just can, take a lot of the money, but also want to be understanding of our capacity to manage these grants and everything else. So we're trying to still work out those details, but certainly something that we're considering as well. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And then I just noticed in the implementation portion, and I may have just overlooked it, that it didn't seem like CEQA and permitting was an eligible activity. And so I just want to make sure, hopefully I just overlooked that and it is included, because otherwise it seems like there's sort of a missing step between sort of planning, design, and then implementation.
That is a good point. I did not mention that in my talk, but yes, CEQA and permitting is something that they will be able to get funding for.
Okay. And then just my last comment, the Bureau of Indian Affairs does provide some vulnerability assessment and planning funding to federally recognized tribes. And so if there's a way to sort of, leverage that funding with this opportunity and sort of tie that into the solicitation, that may be a way to maximize this funding. By sort of adding the additional requirements for the state compliance things that are listed. So just a comment for something to consider moving forward.
Yeah, that's a great flag. I think Ella and I both will be following up on that.
Any additional comments or questions from council members? I do have one question. There are a variety of pots of funding to do programming or planning assistance. I was thinking of the Coastal Commission has some pots of money that they use. So how are you guys working together? I know you mentioned that you guys, collaborate with BCDC and others. Can you talk a little bit more about how you guys collaborate so that we can make sure we're getting the most out of the funding that we do have available for these steps?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I might ask Ella to chime in if there's anything that I miss. Yes, we have worked really closely with them. We recognize that these, could potentially be almost these like competing pots of funding, and we absolutely didn't want that. And so really what we tried to do was make sure that we were basically providing this like lead up opportunity for people to then be able to go to the Coastal Commission to actually do those LCP updates. So a lot of that community visioning, the vulnerability assessments, all of those things are in line with the LCP update requirements. And again, worked with Coastal Commission staff to make sure that we were, in compliance and following that. But then there is not that overlap where, of course, it's much better to go to the Coastal Commission where the staff, knows the ins and outs of that process. And so that's kind of a separate funding, but very complementary to the two of them.
Thank you.
Anything to add? Yeah.
If I may just add, we did develop this in very close collaboration with the Sea Level Rise State Agency Collaborative. So all of the members of those state agencies are working really closely with us to ensure that nothing is duplicative and everything complements other pots of funding.
Thank you. Right. Any other questions or comments? Okay. All right. So we need a motion in a second.
I'll make a motion to approve the staff recommendation.
We have a motion from
I'll
Councilmember
second.
Landau, second from Councilmember Jackson. May we have the roll call vote, Holly?
Chair Dunlap,
Aye.
Katie Landau,
Aye.
Alexis Jackson,
Yes.
Megan Rocha.
Yes.
The council voted unanimously. The motion passes.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Moving on to item number 6, Ella McDougall, please proceed. The floor is yours when you're ready.
Thank you. Okay. Hi. Good afternoon, council members. Thanks for your time and attention today. My name is Ella McDougall. I'm the Climate Change Program Manager with OPC. And today I'm presenting item 6, the Contaminated Sites Inventory and Remediation Prioritization to Address Risk from Sea Level Rise. Slide, please. The risks from the impacts of sea level rise on contaminated sites have become abundantly more prevalent in our conversations in the past few years. In 2019, a seminal study called Toxic Tides illuminated the gravity of the issue, especially as it related to nearby environmental justice communities, known as EJ communities from herein. The study found that over 400 hazardous facilities were at risk of sea level rise, and the EJ communities are 6 times more likely to be located within a kilometer of these facilities. In 2020, the Legislative Analyst's Office released a report about the threats sea level rise posed to California. One of the major areas of concern were sites that contained toxic contamination and are susceptible to groundwater shoaling, which occurs when the water table shifts and mobilizes whatever substance may be stored within the soils. The State Water Resources Control Board has done preliminary assessment to find that 250 open and 204 closed sites, toxic sites, are at risk of sea level rise, but there is very little information on the exact risk or which sites need to be reopened and therefore prioritized for remediation. The Department of Toxic Substance Control has also preliminarily ID'd 300 active sites that are at risk to the impacts of climate change and sea level rise, which suggests that 1,500 closed sites would be at risk as well. Both of these studies suggest the urgent need for further detailed assessment and remediation about sea level rise vulnerability specifically. Slide, please. As the issue has caught the attention of decision makers, communities, and academics alike, the state has begun to take action. DTSC recently released its draft sea level rise guidance to project managers for cleanup activities, which is now available for public comment. DTSC hosts an online site called EnviroStore, which is a data management system for tracking hazardous waste facilities and sites. However, the site has limited functionality and site details are difficult to sift through, especially as a general member of the public. Water boards has begun to update their site cleanup policy so that it includes climate change vulnerability assessments and adaptation plans. Similar to DTSC, Water Boards has an online site called GeoTracker, where information about contaminated sites under Water Board's jurisdiction is stored. However, an unknown number of vulnerable closed sites are not currently included in GeoTracker, meaning they're not considered in current sea level rise assessments. Last year, OPC funded a UC Santa Cruz-led research project called Characterizing Toxic Waste Sites in the San Francisco Bay region and their exposure to future sea level rise and groundwater flooding. The 2 projects, the one I'm proposing today and this Santa Cruz-led research project, already have and will continue to coordinate their site assessment and prioritization efforts. The proposed project will help state agencies apply the findings from this Bay Area project and lead to further statewide assessment and action. Slide, please. The proposed project will include the following objectives over the next 2 years. Both state agencies, DTSC and water boards, will build capacity within their organizational structure to address the specific and unique threats of sea level rise. A modernization of their online database systems will add closed or historic sites, sea level rise, and groundwater metrics. A set of criteria will be developed to identify the most vulnerable sites, including contaminant type, sea level rise risk, distance to groundwater, nearby vulnerable community, and other metrics as they are identified. This will be applied to create a prioritization of the contaminated sites most vulnerable to sea level rise, which in essence is a sea level rise vulnerability assessment of state monitored contaminated sites in California. Slide, please. The proposed project will include outreach and feedback from local EJ communities. Based on updates from EnviroStore and GeoTracker, a joint dashboard will be created so the public can access quick information about nearby sites and vulnerability. To accompany this work, DTSC will also facilitate contaminant transport and fate research, which is identified as a priority for making adaptation decisions. Adaptation plan templates for contaminated sites in need of further remediation will also be drafted. This project will fill a critical need for a prioritization of contaminated sites vulnerable to sea level rise while building capacity in our fellow state agencies so that they can continue to address this critical need and protect our most vulnerable communities. And finally, it will raise much needed awareness about addressing this issue at the statewide level, as well as at the local and neighborhood level. Slide, please. Finally, I'd like to touch on how this project will benefit EJ communities and address equity issues. While the EJ communities have not yet been defined for the purposes of this project, tribes will be included. The prioritization will offer transparency for these communities so that.
So we'll do that one first.
Thank you. Hi, Laura Walsh with the Surfrider Foundation. We're definitely in support of this effort. I think it's pretty clear why we should know where there are toxic sites, especially those vulnerable to climate change. And I just wanted to quickly offer up an example of a case where I think that this dashboard that's being proposed is really relevant. Surfrider recently participated in a hearing regarding the Magnolia Tank Farm proposal in Huntington Beach. This is an area where a developer was proposing to site multifamily housing in an extremely low-lying community vulnerable to sea level rise, where the groundwater table is about 3 feet below surface level. Because of the immense interest in siting housing, particularly with promises around affordable housing, there can be a lot of interest in trying to actually make these proposals happen. The last thing we want the state to be doing, though, is citing EJ communities where toxic waste is vulnerable to climate impacts like sea level rise. That's the kind of disaster we're seeing play out in Bayview, Hunters Point in San Francisco, where I live. So we just really support having a tool that we can use to communicate at agency meetings like this and that can help decision makers make equitable decisions. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more public speakers in the room? All right, we'll move to the virtual public commenters.
Thank you. We have 2 virtual commenters. The first is going to be Raymond Heimstra and the second, Jennifer Kalt. Raymond, you have the floor.
Good afternoon, everybody. Ray Heimstra with Orange County Coastkeeper, and I want to echo Laura Walsh's comments about supporting this. This is really necessary. We also worked along with surf riders and others to inform the Coastal Commission about the Magnolia Tank Farm project, which is adjacent to the Ascon State Superfund site. DTSC hasn't taken sea level rise into consideration at all on this. And that has led to the city and other agencies also kind of discounting this issue. And it's a huge issue, not in this one spot, but of course statewide. So I strongly support funding this project. Thank you.
Thank you for that comment.
Next speaker is going to be Jennifer Kalt. Jennifer, you have the floor.
Thank you and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jennifer Kalt. I'm the Executive Director of Humboldt Baykeeper based up in the Humboldt Bay area. And I would like to echo Laura Walsh and Ray Heimstra's support for this effort. However, I would like to take the opportunity to highlight the fact that although Humboldt Bay is 303D listed for dioxins and PCBs, our region is often left out of efforts like the Toxic Tides Project and other statewide projects. And our region has dozens of contaminated sites. Many of them have never been assessed, and they're very low lying. They're ringing the bay on former tidal wetlands, very vulnerable to sea level rise and rising groundwater. Many of them are not included in either the GeoTracker or EnviroStore database. And so that's why we often get left out of these projects. Humboldt Baykeeper is working under a grant from California EPA currently to update our 10-year-old database we've been working on of these contaminated sites and to prioritize those that are most vulnerable to rising groundwater in particular. And of course, we have also many EJ communities in our region. Humboldt County has very high number of tribal members and low-income community members, many of which live in close proximity to these contaminated sites. So I'm really excited about this, but I really hope that a big focus can be adding Humboldt County and Humboldt Bay in particular to the database. And I invite anyone to contact me for information. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jennifer.
That is the last of our virtual speakers.
Thank you, Holly. All right, are there any questions or comments from the members of the council?
Thank you for the presentation. I just wanted to take a moment and really acknowledge the OPC's partnership with Kelly PA agencies and helping to address these priority efforts, and really so happy to see that both of the projects are going to include a data modernization piece and that storytelling component. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Yeah, this is just an incredibly important thing to do. My background's in soil science, so I know how complicated, how messy it can be, but how, if sea level rise, occurs in some of these areas, it could be a problem that turns into a catastrophe. So thank you for working with our state agencies to make sure we can get this funding used, smartly, and hopefully we can start cleaning up these toxic sites soon. All right, may we have a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to authorize the disbursement of funds for contaminated sites inventory and the remediation prioritization to address risks to sea level rise.
Thank you.
Second.
Great. We have a motion from Councilmember Jackson, seconded by Councilmember Landau. May we have the roll call vote, please?
Chair Dumlow.
Aye.
Katie Landau.
Aye.
Alexis Jackson.
Yes.
Megan Rocha.
Yes.
The council has voted unanimously. The motion passes.
Great. Thank you very much. All right, we'll move on to item number 7. And the staff presentation will be done by Caitlin Kalua. The floor is yours when you're ready.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, Chair Dumlow and council members. My name is Caitlin Kalua. I'm Deputy Director for OPC, formerly Water Quality Program Manager, hence today's presentation. But presenting on today's item, number 7, which includes 2 action items to improve microplastics understanding and management in California. Next slide, please. Together, the 2 actions brought before you today, that is 7A and 7B, support strategic plan goal 3 to enhance coastal and marine biodiversity, specifically the following targets to address trash and plastic pollution under goal 3.4. Next slide, please. For context and background, OPC has a longstanding commitment and role in addressing plastic pollution, given plastic pollution is pervasive, persistent, and only anticipated to grow as plastic production increases. Next slide, please. In response to rising public concern regarding microplastic pollution and potential aquatic health impacts, the California legislature enacted Senate Bill 1263 in 2018, requiring OPC to develop a statewide microplastic strategy. Following the adoption of the strategy, OPC partnered with California Sea Grant to release a competitive research solicitation as approved during the January 24 council meeting of this year. The solicitation included 2 separate research calls. The first, to improve understanding of microplastic sources and ecological risk in California, and the second, to inform the use, design, and operation of low-impact development, known as LID, a type of green infrastructure to intervene and prevent microplastics from reaching California waters consistent with the recommendations of the statewide microplastic strategy. All applicants were encouraged to integrate diversity and inclusion in the project or research design, which may include mentorship and research experience or partnerships with local community-based organizations, tribes, and impacted communities where applicable. Together, this solicitation advances both the statewide microplastic strategy and the California Sea Grant strategic plan to better understand, protect, enhance, and restore California's coastal and marine ecosystems. Next slide, please. This is an overview of the solicitation process and timeline. This was a highly competitive solicitation with 43 letters of intent that resulted in 19 full proposals, competing for $1.4 million in total available research funds. Figure out this mic, I apologize. 2 technical panels were held for each research call and comprised of national and international subject matter experts who scored and ranked the proposals received. The 5 final recommended projects brought to you today were highly ranked and were selected in consultation with interagency partners at the State Water Resources Control Board. Next slide, please. These are the final 5 recommended projects selected through this process and presented for your approval today. Together, these total over $2 million supported by both OPC and California Sea Grant leveraged funds. The first 3 projects advance Research Call 1 to improve understanding of microplastic sources and ecological risk. And the final 2 projects address Research Call 2 to inform the use, design, and operations of low impact development. Next slide, please. The first project proposes to use museum fish specimens spanning a period of time from the 1940s to the present to examine microplastic contamination in coastal marine species. Successful completion of this project will provide a critical baseline by evaluating samples across the entire state of California over a period of 80 years to improve understanding of how different types of microplastics cycle through the marine food web and document whether past mitigation strategies have changed the types or quantities of plastics in marine wildlife. To advance equity, diversity, and inclusion, this project will include broad public education components, including a temporary bilingual exhibit at the museum, and will support 1 postdoctoral researcher and 2 undergraduate students to reduce barriers in science and provide early career opportunities. Next slide, please. The second project will be among the first to address the question, are clothing dryers a significant source of microplastic pollution? Successful completion of this project will provide the first estimates of real-world dryer emission rates, filling a critical data gap in microplastic emissions inventories. The project will further quantify airborne microfiber emissions before and after installing secondary filters to evaluate whether commercially available secondary dryer filters are an effective mitigation strategy to intercept and prevent fiber emissions. This project will be done in partnership with the Desert Research Institute and 5 gyres, and will additionally recruit and engage community members to participate in the study to test microfiber emissions from real-world events with outreach done in partnership with Plastic Free Future, a 501c3 nonprofit organization based in the San Francisco Bay Area. Finally, project outcomes can additionally benefit the San Francisco Bay Area by determining and quantifying microplastic emissions in these communities from the specific microplastic emission potential source. Next slide, please. The third and last project relating to Research Call 1 will quantify microplastics in the Monterey Bay watershed, filling a geographic gap between the San Francisco Bay Area and the Southern California Bight regions, as well as provide data from a watershed that includes agricultural plastics, which are applied to fields in the Monterey Bay watershed at a rate of 20 million tons per year. Microplastic samples will be collected from rivers, offshore waters, beach sand, and from biota that includes krill, anchovy, sardines, and whale fecal matter. Successful completion of this project is anticipated to result in detailed recommendations to the Regional Water Quality Control Board regarding site-specific best management practices to mitigate microplastics into the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary. This project will include training for local community members to participate in beach surveys and sample collection, as well as provide early career research opportunities by partnering with the California State University of Monterey Bay and leveraging opportunities to mentor students as part of a program with the Salinas High School. Next slide, please. The last 2 projects address and advance the research priorities of the second research call to inform the use and design of low impact development, also known as LID or LID, as a potential strategy to intervene and prevent microplastics from washing from our city streets and into California's waters. Successful completion of this first project will improve understanding of the impact of urban land use characteristics on the microplastic removal and capture efficacy of structural LID BMPs. The project will specifically evaluate site-specific soil conditions, bioretention soil media, vegetation, and other design factors to inform LID design. The project team will provide research and hands-on learning opportunities through a partnership with the UCLA Engineering School, which works with 20 schools and over 800 students in Los Angeles Unified and Inglewood Unified School Districts, as well as produce project results that may inform potential future installation of LID BMPs in urban areas vulnerable to microplastic pollution. Next slide, please. While the previous project critically evaluates the effects of land use on microplastic pollution in urban stormwater and LID function, this second project will result in strategies and guidance for effective stormwater BMP design, operations, and maintenance. Critically, this final project will address a knowledge gap by evaluating the microplastic removal efficiency in up to 6 existing BMPs from the Southern California Stormwater Monitoring Coalition's ongoing regional BMP monitoring network to inform and design operational guidance for microplastic management and reduction. This project will be performed in partnership by the California State University, Long Beach, California State University, Los Angeles, and the Southern California Water Research Project Authority. Mentorship and research and professional experience will additionally be offered to undergraduate students by performing field and laboratory work. Next slide, please. The final recommendation for this item is to approve the disbursement of $1,905,672,000 to California Sea Grant for the administration of the following projects to improve understanding and inform management of microplastic pollution in California. This amount is higher than the approximately $1.3 million that was approved by this council in January of this year, including which includes California Sea Grant's administration costs for these projects. Overall, OPC staff seeks approval to increase the January authorization from $1.3 million to over $1.9 million to increase the total available for research and fund these final 5 recommended projects that together advance the full priorities of the solicitation. Next slide, please. The second action item on today's agenda, 7B, is approval of the staff recommendation to provide an augmentation of $180,000 to an existing grant with the Southern California Coastal Water Research Project, in which this funding will leverage samples collected by the Southern California Bight Regional Monitoring Program, an existing OPC funded environmental MPA program, to provide a baseline of microplastics occurrence data. It's the first of its kind region-wide for the Southern California Bight, as well as an assessment of estuaries coastwide. Next slide, please. Thank you. I'm available to answer any questions regarding these 2 action items.
Thank you, Caitlin. Do we have any members of the public who wish to comment on 7A or 7B? Looks like we have 1 in the room, maybe 2.
Good afternoon, Chair and Council members. My name is Miholy Guerin. I'm the Plastic Pollution Policy Manager with the Surfrider Foundation. As you know, plastic is problematic in every stage of its life cycle, but microplastics are a particularly insidious form of plastic. Addressing microplastics at the source, as in significantly reducing the production of plastics, especially single-use plastics, is the most effective solution in addressing this issue. Overall, Surfrider is in strong support of funding all of the selected microplastic research projects and offer the following recommendations. First, we encourage interagency communication and sharing of research results, which will inform management decisions. In particular, CalRecycle is leading the implementation of SB 54, authored by Senator Allen. And over the next 10 years, there will be $5 billion available for plastic pollution reduction and restoration projects in low-income communities in California, which often are at the highest risk of pollution exposure. The findings from these research projects can help determine where to best distribute these funds, and we appreciate OPC for prioritizing equity and environmental justice considerations in its decision-making. We also are excited to see the research project on clothes, dryers, and microfibers. The topic is also being addressed through the legislature, so additional research will help inform policy making. Lastly, when developing and sharing outreach and educational materials for these research projects, we encourage sharing information and resources on the harms of the whole life cycle of plastics, in addition to the downstream impacts of microplastics and ways to cut down our single-use plastic consumption. Microplastics are one part of the much larger issue of plastic extraction, production, consumption, and disposal, which is an important narrative to share publicly. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, council members. Thank you for this opportunity to comment on action item 7, consideration and approval to disperse funds to address microplastic pollution. My name is Tanya Torres, and I am the Marine Debris Research Associate with California Sea Grant. And our team has been working in partnership with the former Water Quality Program Manager, now Deputy Director Caitlin Kalua, to manage the 2023 Microplastic Research Program request for proposals. On behalf of California Sea Grant, I would like to provide our full support regarding action item 7A, consideration of authorization to disperse funding for projects that improve the understanding and informed management of microplastic pollution. California Sea Grant and the Ocean Protection Council have had an existing relationship and partnership to address marine debris and plastic pollution through the 2018 to 2024 California Ocean Litter Prevention Strategy. And through this partnership, we co-developed the 2023 Microplastic Research Program Request for Proposals to specifically advance microplastics understanding and management in California, which is consistent with the priorities outlined in the California Ocean Litter Prevention Strategy and the statewide microplastic strategy. These proposed projects will meet California Sea Grant's 2024 to 2027 strategic plan priority topics under our Healthy Coastal Ecosystems Goal 1, including marine debris, land-based sources of trash, microplastics, and chemical contaminants, as well as topics under our Resilient Communities and Economies Goal 2, including water quality hazards and compound risks to coastal habitats, communities, and economies. In summary, California Sea Grant recognizes the importance of furthering microplastics research and management strategies in California and believes the proposed projects align with the priorities of both the Ocean Protection Council and California Sea Grant. These projects have our full support. Thank you for your time, and we look forward to our continued partnership.
Thank you for your comments. Holly, do we have anyone on Zoom?
We have one virtual caller, and that's going to be Heather Podol. Heather, you have the floor.
Thank you. This is Heather Podol, an advocacy and partnership coordinator for FiberShed. Thank you, OPC, for critical investments in research and action to address microplastic pollution. As this work advances, we urge you to use OPC's unique position to develop systemic approaches for source reduction of microplastic fibers released continuously from synthetic textiles. The volume of textile production and consumption has grown dramatically in the past 2 decades, driven almost entirely by growth in the production of synthetic plastic fiber. Global polyester production more than doubled between 2000 and 2015, with industry projections for 2030 to have quadrupled the amount from 2000. Countering the financial, social, and market forces driving this growth will require complex approaches and collaboration among agencies, stakeholders, and innovators in the fiber and textile industry developing healthier alternatives to the polluting materials that are currently predominating. OPC has already modeled systemic recommendations for actions to address plastic pollution. In February of 2021, OPC endorsed a set of recommended actions to address plastic pollution in California's coastal and marine ecosystems, including partnerships with state and local agencies on procurement, local ordinances to affect material use change, feasibility research on reuse and refill, EPR for plastic products, and support to reduce the use of plastic in fishing gear. Similarly, systemic and innovative approaches are needed to address the plastic textile materials that generate microplastic fibers. Your leadership is needed to incentivize healthier materials, lower rates of consumption, and help build new models for design and use of textile materials that do not generate microplastic emissions. OPC is uniquely positioned within California's leadership to bring a high level of innovative analysis for systemic action. Thank you so much for your work.
Thank you for your comments. Holly, do we have anyone else?
That is it.
Great. Do we have any comments from members of the council? Oh, yes, please.
Yeah, well, I want to
thank you for your work. And I want to particularly point out how important it is for us to get more data on a number of these issues, but I particularly am excited to see your slide on the issue of clothes dryers. We know there's a big problem there. One of the things that keeps coming up, both from researchers I've talked to, but also in the context of some bills that are making their way through, is the lack of information. And then of course you've got folks from industry that are trying to capitalize on the lack of information. So this is, so I guess, well, I'd love to hear, when do you see this investigation coming together? When any sense of when you're going to start to get some preliminary information that we can work off of?
Absolutely. No, I appreciate that question. That is, each of these projects are 2-year projects anticipated to begin approximately October of this year, with final publications then complete fall of 2025. That, not to say we won't have preliminary findings, potential workshops in partnership with California Sea Grant. The researchers will be presenting preliminary findings, meeting together on an annual basis. Again, it's only 2-year project. So, but a series of and principal investigator opportunities to share information, but also again, final project completion and reports will be 2025.
Okay, I'd love to, maybe we can connect. You can connect with Tina on my staff, but we've been working with some folks at UCLA Law School on a number of areas in this space, particularly looking at the nexus between policy and science and law. And there really are some significant research gaps, and to the extent that we can make sure that you're aware at least of what they've identified as the research gaps, so that to the extent that you're already doing this, you can make sure that they're being addressed in your work. I think that would be immensely helpful for a number of people that are working in this space right now. So I really appreciate your work, and obviously thanks to the other public commenters. There's some really good suggestions that I know you're going to be incorporating.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from members of the council? Yes, Councilmember Jackson.
So I agree. It's really encouraging to see that we're addressing kind of the more invisible side of the plastic pollution crisis, and that we're focusing on filling information gaps more so towards a statewide approach that we can quickly get to solutions at the state level. I did have a question about Project 7A1. So given the desire to kind of gain a comprehensive understanding of plastics across the food web, I'm wondering if you can provide any clarity either from the proposal or their justification around why they're taking a fish only approach versus a combination of inverts and fishes. Just given, they're all across different trophic levels, and it will be informing a baseline. So just wanting to think through any biases there.
No, absolutely. And this is one where they are using the museum specimen. So I think it's also coming down to what was available for this project. So I was thinking about this myself this morning. Essentially that there are, it's a pretty robust specimen collection over, again, a span of 8 decades that includes, it can include plankton, but also benthic invertebrates. So it's actually pretty expansive rather than specifically marine fish. So I do apologize if I misspoke during the presentation, but upon further reflection, there's about 6 different guilds that will be targeted for each region based on what's available in that species in the specimens.
That sounds great to me. Thanks.
Absolutely.
Any other comments?
If I may follow up, just for the fish component, I think it's also because there is a looking at the gastrointestinal tract, which is where I think I also focus on the fish component. But again, it's more comprehensive. Thank you.
Well, I'm just curious how you collect whale fecal matter.
I shall inquire with the PI.
Yeah. All right. All right. Yeah, there are different internship programs out there, I'm sure. So, all right. So we can move on to our motions and vote. Any objection to grouping these together, 7A and 7B?
Make a motion to approve the staff recommendations for items 7A and 7B.
Great. Motion from Councilmember Landau to hear a second.
Second.
Thank you, Councilmember Jackson. All right, may we have a roll call vote, please?
Chair Dumlow,
Aye.
Katie Landau. Aye. Alexis Jackson,
Yes.
Megan Rocha.
Yes.
The council has voted unanimously. The motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, now we will move on to item number 8, the implementation of 30 by 30 informational update. May we have the presentation?
All right, good afternoon, council members. My name is Ann Deep. I'm one of OPC's 30 by 30 program managers.
And I am Abby Mohan, the other 30 by 30 program manager. Next slide, please. Well, we are really excited to be here to present OPC's progress and next steps on 30 by 30. But first, what is 30 by 30? So to safeguard biodiversity, scientists around the world urge conservation of 30% of the lands and waters by 2030. And in October 2020, Governor Newsom signed Executive Order N8220, making California the first state to committing to doing just that. And in December, this past December, 30 by 30 was adopted at the UN Biodiversity Conference as a global goal. 30 by 30 complements and supports all of OPC's strategic goals and objectives. Next slide, please.
A 30 by 30 conserved area has two components: durably conserved and providing biodiversity protections. OPC is leading the state's efforts in the 30 by 30 initiative in coastal waters, and our strategies include adaptively managing our MPA network, enhancing conservation in national marine sanctuaries, exploring the role of existing other spatial management measures, and supporting tribally led conservation through Indigenous Marine Stewardship Areas, or IMSAs.
Next slide, please. All right, so our first approach is adaptively manage the state's MPA waters. The state's MPA network covers 16% of state waters, and it meets that definition of conserved that Ann was just giving, because the MPAs were designed to safeguard ecosystem function and health. They are durably protected, and they've already shown positive outcomes for biodiversity. So this gets us halfway to our 30 by 30 goal. So the state has just completed the first decadal management review process, and out of this resulted a set of prioritized recommendations to guide that adaptive management process going forward. Any future changes to the MPA network, whether it's boundary or regulatory changes, will happen as a part of that adaptive management process, and there is not a separate process to expand existing or create new MPAs as part of the 30 by 30 strategy. Next slide, please. So building upon the findings and recommendations from the Decadal Management Review, OPC, the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, and other partner agencies are working to implement near, medium, and long-term recommendations. And California Department of Fish and Wildlife and the California Fish and Game Commission are actively developing a process to evaluate possible changes to the MPA network. Proposed findings are anticipated for consideration at the August Fish and Game Commission meeting. Next slide, please. All right, our next strategy is to work closely with our federal partners and national marine sanctuaries. California is home to 4 designated national marine sanctuaries, which cover almost 41% of our state waters. These are really special places, from the deep sea corals of Cordell Bank, the productive upwelling in the Greater Farallones, the majestic kelp canopy in Monterey Bay, and the Galapagos of California, the Channel Islands. These sanctuaries were designated to protect different resources and manage a variety of different threats. So each sanctuary is being evaluated for inclusion individually in 30 by 30. Next slide, please. So as part of this process, OPC is working closely with the Greater Farallones National Marine Sanctuary over the next year as they go through their management plan update process through 2024 in order to make sure that they align their management efforts and the resulting potential for increased biodiversity with the state's 30 by 30 goals. OPC is also concurrently analyzing the existing management plans and activities in Monterey Bay and Channel Island National Marine Sanctuaries. Next slide, please. So our third strategy is we're looking at the range of other spatial management measures beyond MPAs and national marine sanctuaries. There are a lot of management activities that happen, whether it is a water quality control board area or an essential fish habitat area. And we really want to understand, how do these other management measures provide those benefits, those durably conserved biodiversity benefits that 30 by 30 is looking to achieve. So next slide, please. In order to do this, OPC is developing a centralized inventory and map of spatial management measures in state waters. Following inventory completion, OPC will initiate an evaluation of these measures through the creation of a science working group. And this science working group will help us come up with evaluation criteria to determine long-term durability and the extent to which what biodiversity benefits are being provided by each of these areas. The final inventory and map will be shared publicly to solicit feedback and ensure it represents an accurate and comprehensive catalog. And then the working group will also review and prioritize a list of OPC identified projects to address remaining science needs and data gaps. And we anticipate returning to the council in spring 2024 with recommendations for some of these prioritized investments. Next slide, please.
Awesome. Thank you, Abby. Our next approach is supporting tribally led conservation. Tribal communities have been stewards of California's lands and waters since time immemorial, and the state has much to learn from their experience and traditional knowledge. Supporting tribally led conservation will be key to advancing 30 by 30, which is why OPC is committed to enhancing engagement with tribes. This means supporting coastal and ocean access for tribes to enhance connections to their ancestral lands and waters. It also means ensuring tribal priorities, knowledges, and perspectives are respectfully considered and included in coastal and ocean policies. OPC will be working in partnership with California Native American tribes to establish Indigenous Marine Stewardship Areas, IMSAs, to support and enhance tribal stewardship of California's coastal and ocean resources. Next slide, please. We will start with conducting meaningful consultation and receiving feedback to inform the conceptualization of IMSAs. We want to create a robust shared partnership that advances 30 by 30 and advances tribal priorities and perspectives on coastal marine resources for the IMSA concept. OPC is developing a timeline for early and main consultation schedules, and we'll share this with tribes in the upcoming months. Early consultation with tribes will inform this conceptualization and highlight tribal priorities and perspectives. As part of early consultation, OPC is preparing topic items to guide discussion and outreach materials for meaningful, wide-reaching engagement. Next slide, please. And last but not least, community engagement. You've probably heard this 10,000 times, but 30 by 30 is a bold, ambitious plan that requires unprecedented statewide collaboration and coordination. So we are developing an engagement plan that will implement outreach and support strategies to connect OPC with coastal community members. The vision is to forge ongoing partnerships for robust dialogue and collaboration. Next slide, please. As part of outreach and engagement, OPC is finalizing social media campaign strategies that will highlight and uplift the diverse voices contributing to 30 by 30 around the state. Efforts are underway to create a more accessible and easily navigatable website portal with information on relevant topics, upcoming meetings, and ways to get involved. OPC will continue to collaborate with local regional partners and organizations on educational workshops, events, and development of useful resource materials. OPC believes that community-led conservation is a powerful driver of 30 by 30 and is committed to building bridges and strengthening community partnerships. Next slide, please. With Abby and I coming on board, we're excited and actively working to engage our partners, coastal communities, to help advance 30 by 30, because it's these coastal waters, these special places that make California vibrant and California our home. So thank you, and with that, we'll take any questions.
Thank you for those presentations. Do we have any members of the public who wish to comment on this in the room? Looks like we have a couple. Come on down.
Hello. My name is Natalie Bartel, and I work for the organization Coastal Quest, which is a service-oriented nonprofit working with communities and governments to build more resilient coasts. We would like to comment on the section titled Exploring the Role of Other Spatial Management Measures in California's Coastal Waters. We think the centralized inventory and map of spatial management measures in state waters is a very exciting effort. We did want to note that our organization has developed a Central Coast-based pilot tool with the regional and California state water boards that is also an inventory of spatial management measures, biodiversity, and water quality data. This tool was supported by state mitigation funds, and we presented it to the MPA state leadership team a few months ago. It's now ready to go live, and Coastal Quest and the water boards are just trying to decide where to host and maintain it. We've had discussions about scaling it across the state and have a manual that documents the approach and data sources needed to replicate this inventory tool. So we would welcome a meeting with OPC to find ways to leverage our pilot work to help support your efforts and continue conversation around this item. Thanks.
Thank you for your comments.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Emily Parker. I'm a staff coastal and marine scientist for Heal the Bay. We're an environmental nonprofit based on the lands of the Tongva and Chumash peoples, and our organization has nearly 40 years of experience working to make the coastal waters and watersheds of Greater LA healthy, safe, and clean. As part of our mission, we've been deeply involved in the state's efforts to conserve and protect coastal and marine biodiversity, including the 30 by 30 initiative and the California MPA network. So I'd like to start by thanking the council and OPC staff for their dedication to meeting the 30 by 30 goals. And today's updates provide great insight into the complex task ahead of us to durably protect 30% of our coastal waters by 2030. As noted by staff during today's presentation, a key approach will be adaptively managing our state's MPA network. So as we finalize the first decadal management review, the state now has the unique opportunity to take all that we have learned during this first DMR and apply it to adaptively managing our network. We strongly support OPC's proposed next steps to work with partners to implement the prioritized recommendations the Fish and Game Commission have put out. And we are actually very closely tracking the imminent MPA petition process that was mentioned by staff today. And while we recognize there is a critical need to embark on this process, we also would like to call attention to the reality that publicly submitted petitions can't be the only adaptive changes that we will make to the network. So broad input from diverse community members that use and depend on this network have to be included, of course. But we do feel that to adaptively manage to improve resilience to these and other stressors because of climate change, we will need to be adaptive and work internally to meet those goals. And the onus for achieving that cannot solely rely on the public and submitted petitions, but we want that to also come from the experts at our state's managing agencies like the OPC. So we've already requested to Fish and Game to work closely with OPC and the statewide leadership team to conduct a robust analysis of climate vulnerability, including mapping and identifying high priority areas for conservation that are currently experiencing rapid climate impacts or areas that may act as refugia and benefit from a strengthening in protection. This process of identifying needs would work really nicely with the proposed measures that were already mentioned today, like the centralized inventory of spatial management measures. So just wanted to request that that is something that the OPC looks for as we move forward in meeting the 30 by 30 goals. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those comments. And Holly, do we have anyone on Zoom?
Yes, we have two virtual commenters. The first is going to be Lily Mulligan, followed by Ricky Erickson. Lily, you have the floor.
Thank you and good afternoon, council members. My name is Lily Mulligan and I'm the Ocean Conservation Coordinator at Wild Coast. Wild Coast is an international team that conserves coastal and marine ecosystems and addresses climate change through natural solutions. In order to support the 30 by 30 initiative, Wild Coast is actively restoring 42 acres of blue carbon wetlands in the San Diego River Valley and Bataquitos Lagoon here in San Diego County. In addition, we are working with Scripps Institution of Oceanography to measure the carbon sequestered and stored in the sediment of San Diego County wetlands. The potential of blue carbon storage should be considered as a factor when deciding what to protect under the 30 by 30 initiative. Additionally, Wild Coast and over 600 partners, one of which you just heard from, the MPA Collaborative, work to protect ocean wilderness off the coast of California through marine protected area management, monitoring, outreach, and public engagement. The MPA network throughout California requires strong and diligent protection in order to meet the standards of 30 by 30. Finally, I would like to thank OPC for your continued support of MPAs, especially through the 30 by 30 process. Thank you for this opportunity to share some insights on Wild Coast efforts.
Thank you for your comments. And Holly, our next.
Next speaker is going to be Ricky Erickson. Ricky, you have the floor.
Good afternoon. This is Dr. Vicki Erickson, Marine Program Director of the California Marine Sanctuary Foundation. We want to thank the Ocean Protection Council for continually to efficiently advance the MPA network decadal management review and help us achieve our 30 by 30 goals. Climate change and industrial impacts bring a suite of stressors to the MPA network, none of which were considered during the elaborate original design. To date, we have not assessed the effectiveness of our MPAs comprehensively. How well are they protecting representative habitats, biodiversity, and species along our entire coast? Are some at risk? Nor are we able to determine the network's resilience in the face of changing climate. To address this, we strongly encourage, first, that we conduct an assessment of the ability of the current MPA network to protect California ecosystems from current and future climate impacts. This includes understanding how size, location, designation type, length of protections, sea level rise impacts, and increasing water temperatures may alter our network's ability to meet its LMLPA goals. Secondly, the Fish and Game Commission has stated that it plans to embark upon an adaptive management planning process that centers around climate resilience. And we strongly support that we embark on this process immediately and in advance of our 30 by 30 discussions. We suggest that Ocean Protection Council works closely with partners to advance a comprehensive analysis of the network, identify critical biodiversity hotspots, and pursue any additional spatial conservation measures warranted in a timely manner. We commend and thank you for your efforts to make our ocean resilient in facing the challenges of today and into the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. Do we have any other public comment?
That is the last one.
Great. Do we have any comments or questions from members of the council? All right. Seeing none. There is no vote on this, so it was only informational. So thank you very much for the presentation. And that concludes item number 8. All right, so we'll move on to number 9, which is a public comment on non-agenda items. So this is for any member of the public who wishes to comment on anything that was not on the agenda. This is your opportunity to do so. Do we have any public speakers in the room first? All right, we'll take those in the room first and then move on to those virtually.
Hello, Carla Heidelberg here again from University of Southern California Sea Grant Program. USC Sea Grant celebrated our 50th anniversary last year, and this year California Sea Grant celebrates their 50th year. I think it's worth noting that celebrating how both programs have worked so well together in the past, but especially this year to leverage funding and potential impacts on two huge projects. Our ongoing work and joint awards on the Southern California Deep Ocean DDT program and microplastics pollution show the advantage of collaborating, especially in reaching broad audiences and showing unified fronts across the state to reach a greater diversity of communities. USC Sea Grant we've submitted written comments on both of these initiatives and also have a briefer in the back of the room that we invite board members and the public to pick up to show a brief description of these and other projects that we've been working on. We thank the OPC for its continued support of our two programs, and we look forward to working with you in the future to advance your objectives. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. Any more in the room? All right.
Good afternoon, members of the council. I'm Shauna O, and I'm the director of California Sea Grant. I'd like to just take this opportunity to just mention, since Jenn Eckerle brought it up and Carla, that this year marks our 50th anniversary. So I'd like to extend again the invitation to all the members of the council, as well as the OPC staff, as well as all the participants in this room, to come join us to celebrate the partnerships that you heard Carla just mention and the collaboration to help advance the Ocean Protection Council priorities. So the reception is at the California Museum, which is at 1020 O Street. It'll start at 5:30. Please consider joining us. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the invitation. All right, Holly, do we have anyone on Zoom?
Yes, we have a handful of commenters. First is going to be Walter Lamb, followed by Scott Webb, and then caller last four digits 5936. Walter, you have the floor.
Thank you, council members. Good afternoon. I'm Walter Lamb, representing the Bynum Wetlands Land Trust. Touching on 30 by 30 and sea level rise, big topics. I do want to go back to the Bynum Wetlands, which is a ecological reserve for which a restoration planning process has been going on now for about 20 years. And I know some people, favor the project, some people don't. I think we should all agree that having a clear picture of when that project might be able to even commence, let alone be completed, is important, because it's a 9-year project. So from a perspective of 2030, right, we're already looking at beyond that. And the other reason that that's important is because when we talk about 2030, and also when we talk about sea level rise, there are always numbers of different ways to approach a problem. And so if we get locked into one solution and then kind of lose visibility into whether that solution is viable, I think we can miss opportunities. And so what I would say, again, with the Bynum Wetlands is that first, if we understand the timeline, understand the budget, understand the milestones, but in the meantime, also, there's an unwritten, but pretty clear policy currently not to do any kind of interim stewardship. And I want to put out there that interim stewardship is certainly a viable way to convert at least some of the area, into what would be considered 30 by 30 designated area. There's a lot of invasive species there right now, but there's also a lot of native species, and there are ways to promote and expand the native species that really have to be done anyway. So it's not something that's mutually exclusive with long-term restoration. It really complements it, if there's going to be some kind of long-term restoration. So I would just ask for everyone to kind of take a step back and, think it's time to rethink Bionda again, and how do we get that 2030? Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
All right, our next speaker is going to be Scott Webb, followed by caller 5936. Scott, you have the floor.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. Hi, everybody. My name is Scott Webb. I'm the Advocacy Director with the Resource Renewal Institute. I'm just calling in to follow up on a non-agenda item we spoke on last week regarding the bycatch associated with set gill nets. At the July 20th Marine Resource Committee meeting, Department of Fish and Wildlife talked about analyze specific measures to reduce the bycatch, improve bycatch data. We are really encouraged by these propositions and hopefully awaiting some development of management measures that may require some funding in partnership with the Ocean Protection Council. Again, we are very encouraged after this SMRC meeting, and we'll keep you all updated on how this process goes and how we can all further collaborate together. Thank you all so much.
Our next speaker is going to be caller 5936, followed by Caitlin Birch and then Richard Sadowski. Caller, you have the floor.
Eileen Boken, CSFN, speaking on my own behalf. During the August 9th meeting of the Coastal Commission, the Coalition for San Francisco Neighborhoods spoke regarding erosion and accretion on San Francisco's Ocean Beach. The coalition referred to the U.S. Geological Survey study on how sand mining in San Francisco Bay affects sediment transport, causing accretion on the north end and erosion on the south end of Ocean Beach. The coalition urged the Coastal Commission to schedule an informational hearing on the USGS study. OPC is also being urged to schedule an informational hearing on the USGS survey. New subject. On the OPC website, there is a posting regarding a comment period for the State Water Resources Control Board report on desal siting and permitting. Unfortunately, the deadline has already passed. The coalition will be requesting that the agency be reopened public comment. The reasons include the URS report stating that Ocean Beach is well suited for desal. A desal facility could be combined with an ocean water pump station for the city's emergency firefighting water system. There are now options for offshore desal. The Greater Farallones National Marine Sanctuary will begin its management plan review. The waters off Ocean Beach could become a non-contiguous area. However, there would need to be new regs as desal is currently not allowed. Thank you.
Our next speaker is going to be Caitlin Birch, followed by Richard Sadowski. Caitlin, you have the floor.
Thank you, Holly. This is Caitlin Birch with Oceana. I'm echoing some of Scott Webb's comments. We were extremely encouraged by many of the recommendations the Marine Resource Committee put forward to be explored to address bycatch in the California halibut set gillnet fishery in July, including setting maximum soak times to reduce bycatch mortality, gear marking to address whale entanglements, gear loss tracking, and bycatch monitoring in the form of electronic monitoring or an observer program. Many of these recommendations overlap with the OPC's goals and strategic plans, such as efforts in whale entanglements, marine biodiversity, and fisheries. These measures are going to require additional resources, and we look forward to engaging with OPC on this issue going forward to bring this fishery and others into the 21st century and advance the state's conservation goals. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today.
Our last speaker is going to be Richard Sadowski. Mr. Sadowski, you have the floor.
Hi, Richard Sadowski, Homefront Environmental Justice, Morro Bay. I just wanted to kind of say that I am really encouraged that the OPC is continuing to fund, and the governor's office is continuing to fund the OPC with their projects and not cutting back on that funding in these times. And also, I would like to encourage the interns and the California College Core program that the governor had set up. Our group, in collaboration with Ecologistics, has participated in the inaugural College Core program with our Morro Bay Estuary Air Monitoring Project. And this year we have 6 interns that are interested in the project. So we're looking forward to working with them and hopefully securing some grant funding for some equipment. And I just, in these times where you're sharing all this stuff with climate change and all this stuff, and there's so much denial still out there with people, even when they're seeing it in front of their eyes, it's discouraging at time. And I always enjoy listening to the OPC meetings and the good work your staff is doing. So thanks for all your work. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Richard. Do we have anyone else, Holly?
That is the last of the virtual commenters.
Fantastic. All right. Well, do we have any final parting thoughts from council members? All right. Well, that concludes our agenda. Just a reminder, our next meeting will be Tuesday, December 12th from 1 to 5 in the same room, and there will be Zoom participation available. And like what was mentioned earlier, there is a reception this evening for the 50th anniversary of the California Sea Grant. So 5:30 over at the California Museum. Please stop by if you can. And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone.